Let's go. Let's play.
All right.
Yeah. Hello everyone. Here with DavePowers. We're
All
just
right.
having
Hello, everybody.
a great observer talk. That
Yeah,
was
yeah. Hard to getting into aliens and mountain lions, and how they're
aliens and
connected.
all. Oh my gosh. Well, I was just gonna tell Dave about the hunter. Oh yeah, I already told you. But the hunter in the forest theory, which is the reason we don't see aliens is because there are two genes: the elimination gene, that you kill whatever other civilization you see first, and that you hide yourself
Yeah,
to survive.
yeah.
So we better turn off all our street lights because they're
Because
gonna
they
see
can't
us
see
in
in the
5 minutes.
dark.
Yeah.
I know stuff.
I
Stuff I think about.
I was just like, um, yeah. I try not to because I'm just like, what can I do?
Yeah.
But
Right. Right.
there's probably other stuff that's like, what can I do? So,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
yeah. So here with Dave, we've prepared quite a bit. I sent Dave a lot of subjects to go over, and we had a good talk yesterday, kind of ironing it out. Well, the first thing I kind of wanted to talk about, Dave, was like nihilism. And
Yeah.
I will be honest. At first, I was like, "Oh, nihilism bad," and then I talked to you, and I was like, "Oh shit, now I'm a nihilist." Crap, you got me. You got me. Just, I was like,
Yeah. Yeah. I love. I'm glad I could help. Yeah.
ah,
Yeah.
no, it's terrible.
It definitely is. It's part of it. Yeah. I got a whole spiel on nihilism. I can start firing away here if we're ready to go.
Well, yeah, yes, but we did kind of go over it. I can pull up the presentation. Oop,
Oh, nice.
oh, I can pull
Got
up the
some SI
presentation.
notes.
So
Yeah, all right.
this is from apparently from Jordan Peterson's book, and he said there were 4 methods of dealing with death, and
Yeah,
one of them was nihilism.
yeah,
And the positive, like I'll say for you, the positive, the point you're often trying to make to us is like, hey, don't make a big deal out of it. It's not a big deal. Don't expect too much. Expectations high. I mean, you're going to be sad, disappointed, all this stuff. It's like that's very positive for the processing, but the negative part is, if you tell people don't expect anything, they can turn around and hate the world
yeah.
and hate society, and like that's how you get school shooters sometimes.
Right, totally.
Um,
Yeah,
the other thing I noticed with these is that they actually line up to the 4 human needs: uh, hedonism. That'd be nihilism would be OI, not too much. Hedonism would be OE, taking in.
yeah, sure.
Heroism would be DI, and fanaticism, totalitarianism would be DE.
Nice.
So
Yeah,
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 very
right.
weird pattern. Yeah.
It's just that's all over the place, right? Yeah.
But yeah, so I was like, what's your say on like, how do you address negative, not like people seeing the negativity of nihilism?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a really good question. It's very subjective. I feel like people have got to go through their own journey of kind of creating their own story that in the end, I think we're all judged by how well does your worldview line up with reality. I think reality is the ultimate judge that I know I'm constantly trying to work backwards from is what is reality. And so nihilism, I feel like to me, and I've got a whole, NI scam. I've got all this kind of stuff structured out, all the
Mm-hmm.
chapters connecting. So for myself, it feels like nihilism is like inside of a larger topic of like kind of starting off with like even like a theist versus atheist kind of worldview. So it's like for ourselves coming from an extreme Christian worldview, it was like we were living life very much and kind of set it and forget it. We had an answer for everything. So what's life about? What's meaning? What's pleasure? What do you do with suffering? What about the afterlife? So there's all these ready-made answers that we got from Christianity. It's kind of like these add-on programs, here you're a stock human, but take this program of Christianity, and it frames out a worldview that I would say, is 90% does rather well. And you look at that through the statistics. Sure, over history, there's a lot of problems where people will take Christianity too extreme and kill other people and stuff like that. But overall, the Christian worldview has done more good than bad. Again, play along, you can make that fit. So the point is, and Darren Brown talks about this, is that it kind of creates a worldview that more or less is easy to understand. It's got a story, it makes sense, and people can kind of copy and paste it. But the thing that we run into, that we see a lot of Christians, and again, take Christianity and substitute whatever worldview you're born into or whatever. You finally get somewhere in life where it starts to kind of fall apart. And so you start to go to church, you start to ask your pastors, hey, what about these issues? What about this kind of sin, guilt, or problems we're going through? And then, oh, well, the Bible says, or the worldview says, just pray, just do this, just do this, just okay. And then you try that for 20 years and it still doesn't get anywhere. And you start to realize there's like an underground society of Christians, or again, insert your own worldview, of people that are like, yeah, this is, I can't say anything, but I'm miserable, I'm depressed, full of anxiety. And so you start to get in touch with the underground crew. So you see everybody smiling in church, but you know them all individually, that they're rotting inside, they're alcoholics, they're sad, they're upset. And when you start to get access to the data, you realize, oh, they're people in my worldview aren't any happier than people of other worldviews. And so that kind of starts to fall apart.
So that was so interesting you said that, because that reminded me of something in history, which was the secret Protestant societies in the Catholic Church. Those popped up all over, became the cool kids club.
Yeah.
You know, like the Bohemians or whatever, and then it started religious wars, which eventually became our current kind of liberalism and secularism of like, well, we need to trade with the Belgians, so let's overlook that. And they were so violent, and when things were there were crazy things going on when they were like opening up the Bible, that they did stuff that you would not associate with Christians back in the day,
right?
Like communist sex cults way back in like the 1700s, like weird stuff, because they just start questioning everything,
right?
And they just start deconstructing everything. And one thing with you, kind of like, I want to get to it later, but I kind of always think about it as like what Nietzsche said, of like a critique of Nietzsche, as Nietzsche was like, well, we'll get rid of the values, and we'll make our own values,
right?
And what is Nietzsche preaching? We'll get to it later. Like, it's not something we touched when we talked, but he's from a pride-based culture, which is about, I gotta show him the best, I gotta show him so cool, I gotta show him superior, and his whole thing is preaching, hey, and he's doing what the Germans do, which is take things to the ideological extreme.
Sure.
You know, and they keep doing that. Like whatever ideology you give them, they take it too far.
Yeah.
No offense to my German friends,
right.
But it's a pattern through history. But it's like, what values are we putting in its place? And the other thing is that I see that your type, the NIFIs, do really well with this. I'm going to create my own meaning.
Yeah, very much. Yeah.
They do really well with it, you know, like regardless, like they're very good at processing it. And the rest of us kind of aren't as good at it.
Yeah.
It's a lot harder for us.
Yeah. Jesus himself, I think, was NITI. It's Sadhguru, NITI. I see a lot of NIFIs, NITIs. Yeah. Religions, cults, new worldviews. Yeah. Sitting there just puzzling out, worldview for self. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, this is not something I've touched on, but like I was with you, but there was this like I mentioned in one of my videos, Cycle of Ages, which was like that the temperaments are kind of like cycling, but all the different civilizations are cycling themselves, and so it's like a theology would need a TI, like a NT, puzzling out how do I make this all fit together, and then it to get blasted out.
Sure.
Stuff like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm just wondering, like, do we need some more, like, it's like, oh yeah, this is really metal. It's like, when the rest of us, it's just like, this doesn't work for us.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. No, I know what you mean. Yeah. For myself, again, back to my own story and what works for me, and part of what I'm trying to get to work for me is leaning into my demons to where it is ST objectively trackable, so things can be very clearly defined and layered out. One an analogy I could reference is growing up in the 80s and 90s. There was always which martial art is the best. This is like which religion is best, which worldview is best. Karate versus kung fu or whatever, and Christianity versus Islam or whatever. Atheism. And so then along comes the UFC in the late 90s, then eventually in the early 2000s, turns into a real business. So there was a lot of age-old debates that have been around for thousands of years, like karate versus kung fu or whatever, or at least hundreds of years, for a very long time. Brazilian jiu-jitsu, like the whole story of where that came from, is extremely fascinating. So you have all these theories of, who's got the best worldview or idea, whatever. So the UFC comes along and it's like, everybody show up, let's hash it out. And it was very fascinating to watch who actually stood the test of reality. You get a lot of these guru religious martial artists, and they get in the ring and just get their ass kicked. And so I feel like social media is like that for religions. It's like you have all these different religions, and all these people. I say religions like different worldviews. You have all these different groups with different worldviews, and they're all hiding in their part of the world. Like, get the hell out here, get on the center stage. And so with something like YouTube, we have access to the UFC of worldview. We have access of click most viewed or whatever, and watch hundreds or thousands of people that are happy, healthy, successful, and they have a track record of many decades that you can track. Jim Carrey or whoever you want to look at. There's a lot of these people. And so it's like they are kind of standing objectively, defined by like, what do you want to have as successful? It's like, well, somebody who's happy, doesn't have anxiety, doesn't have depression, or has overcome anxiety, overcome depression, gone through it and has found the antidote to it, doesn't suffer with it anymore, has meaning, love, positivity, growth, however you want to define this kind of stuff, something along that direction. And then looking at, okay, who's really that way? You're like, oh, my pastor. It's like, really? You want to say, okay, because we're going to go look, or we're going to drag your pastor out here, just like in the UFC. Oh, then get him out here then. Let's talk. Oh, your pastor just fell apart. He's had some other controversy and then got fired. Like, oh, isn't that weird, right? And so it's looking at trying to go backwards from, out of hundreds of people that we now see on the world stage that are happy, healthy, successful. I'm just working backwards from, okay, what the hell are they doing? Same with the UFC. Like, what the hell are they doing? Oh, they have a ground game, a stand-up game, whatever. So in there, you'll find bits of Christianity and atheism and, et cetera, all the different worldviews. Nihilism as well is a thing that fits in there. It feels like it's a part of a journey. So taking nihilism in particular, like I think the hero's journey kind of maps this out rather well. Like nihilism and dark stuff like that is like a stage that we all have to go through. Now we may call it something different, or maybe very different depending on the individual and the background and all that. But like, yeah, you're going to have to cross the fucking bridge of, what do you do about this is all meaningless, that you could fucking die and nobody gives a shit about you. Kobe Bryant was the greatest guy ever and nobody cared 2 days later. Like, no one's going to care when you die. Like, it doesn't really matter. Like, can you sit with that? Can you hang with that? Oh no, I'm scared. Okay, then run away. Then it's just going to chase you. So your worldview now falls apart of like, how do you deal with that? How do you deal with this? How do you deal with this? So it's about getting a worldview that, you don't necessarily like all these things, but it's like you get a passing grade on what do you do about darkness and meaninglessness and all that kind of stuff. So something, and there's also too, like things like nihilism. It's like, I remember it's kind of like a reverse hero's journey, Mount Everest, rather than like going down into the pit of hell. It's like the pit of hell is up when you look at like documentaries of Mount Everest, and they'll show like the bodies along the way that froze. And these are like triathletes, these are like David Goggins level people that die up there. And it's like, yeah, like on the hero's journey, yes, most people don't make it, which is part of the story, that if you're actually hearing the story of the people that make it up there, that they get to a happy, healthy, successful part in life, they're telling stories of like, yeah, I knew somebody that was way better than me and way onto it. And they were just watching some videos on Mike Day. He was a Navy SEAL guy, went through a whole bunch of hell, got shot like 26 times, and very positive growth mindset guy, really great guy. And then, recently killed himself. Just like, it's sad, it's tragic. It's not a storybook ending for everybody, So it's a very, again, if you don't have like NIFI or NITI, like try and like grasp all this and make sense of all this and it's more of like spending the time to really try and puzzle it all out and conclude, But that just last point, what I see though, of the people that are very happy, healthy, successful, they're of all types, all religions, all backgrounds, all worldviews, all intelligence levels, all everything. And then at first we tried to find like, is there a certain trait or a certain type or a certain, it's like, it's not what we're seeing that it's just people go through pressure and they're forced into some time in life where they have to sit there and struggle through their own worldview, take what works from Christianity for them, take what works from their past, their saviors, their demons, and put it all together to where they can get a worldview that overlaps real reality a lot better. And then that's what creates the lack of friction and tension, which is a lot of it's just what the Zen guys and the Stoic guys have always been saying, Right. Right.
Sorry.
It's a lot of homes.
So I was for some reason my brain went to the bridging of the temperaments, saviors and demons, and how painful that is.
Yeah.
How painful it is for me, and like I don't know, this just doesn't relate, but like I have this vision of this alchemy happening where things get fused and you become a whole person. I'm kind of wanting to tell that story, but yeah, it's difficult, and if it were easy, everyone would do it.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, just jump in there, like so much so, and you'll see it as you get older. You can see it in your current life now, looking at like a 16-year-old. You're like, geez, kid, it's the Deadpool movie. Well, it's one of the things that we love about the hero's journey, and then movies that the entire culture like votes with their thumbs up and their dollars, like, and the Effies are in tune with this. So like there's something that's hitting with the human species with or psyche with Star Wars and the Marvel movies, where there's something in it that is hitting us. And some of these comic book characters, they really nail these kind of transformations. The Deadpool one is probably the most simple, specific. Some of them are kind of vague, but like the Deadpool one, they literally say like, here, we're going to lock you in this torture chamber, and if you can get the genes to turn on, this will do it. And they just leave them in there and torch them. And when you watch Mike Tyson's story, Mike Tyson, who just was one of the worst, most horrible, abusive, bad characters ever since he was a kid. I remember growing up, just everybody was afraid of that guy. Just a very lost soul, and to now see him as like this loving, positive, caring person. Yeah, he still punched the guy out on the plane a couple months ago. That's pretty funny. But it's like he's now just like, I just wouldn't believe it. Like I have to like update in the positive. Like I hardly believe how positive it is. So we keep seeing that. But like when you really listen, it's more like if you yourself are in in an extreme state of pain, and then you hear somebody telling their story about how painful it was, like you can hear them and you can connect to them. But if you're like in a good mood and they're like, oh, it's really hard, you're like, oh, I'm sure it'll work out, because your emotions are missing it. I think it's probably harder for a masculine FI. But
well,
when you really
that was something that we're going to talk about a little bit later. Is I do think pain is the basis of empathy. Experiencing pain yourself is
because you got to get a worse, where the ops psychology, the ops presupposition of like how we're able to crack the personality code, so to say, is with the assumption that humans are driven by avoiding pain. 90% or more is really just the trick of humans is we're just avoiding pain. And so when there's we call it the pain equation, and this is like, you literally will hear the top people, these successful people that make it in the UFC, in self-growth, they'll say things like the pain of regret or the pain of discipline. They'll talk about this thing that we call the pain equation. So if you know what the pain equation is, and you listen to all these stories, you're going to hear it all over the place. They'll say it slightly different. But what happens is your buddy Dave starts to realize, oh, the pain of doing some SE is extremely painful and electrifies my body. It triggers me and it freaks me out, but that's not as real as I thought it was. And I'll get more pain per decade if I don't actually push into it. And so still driven by pain. I'm still driven by avoiding pain. I just look at everybody else and I'm like, you're guzzling bleach because it's strawberry flavored and it feels good in the moment, but it's going to give you so much more pain later. I'm still driven by trying to avoid pain. I'm just trying to avoid pain over a larger scale of time, because I see what happens if I don't do my demons. Not that I do them or whatever, but that's kind of motivation.
Being blast last, I'm always like, oh, I'm not ready. And when I actually do it, I'm just like, was it that hard?
Right. I know. See, because it's a trick. It's an evolutionary trick. And that's why it's like Donald Hoffman and Susan David, where they talk about, hey, it's a space, it's a trick, it's a game, it's an illusion. And it's a daily practice. What sucks about it is it wears off tomorrow morning. It feels like we're living in a fucking movie. It's like I had a great workout last night and I got up this morning. I'm like, oh, I don't want to do it. I'm like, come on. It was just like 8 hours ago. Like, can't you transfer that over to the next morning? And it's just like, it is, again, you listen to the people that are very happy. They are aware that their body and their mind is playing tricks on them. And they're what's hard is like, it's you have to grow into external programs. Like so if you look at it this way, like why is it that we say a kid crying in their bedroom is the easiest person to type, or a criminal? Because you just have somebody who's all in on their savior. So everything is extremely predictable. So there's nobody home if you look at it that way. You know, if you're an IJ and you're like, control everything, you're like, is that free choice? That's not free choice. That's like a lion going, eat the chicken. Like, that's not free choice. That's just what you do. That's just automatic. You know, if you see like a lion hanging out with a little bunny rabbit on TikTok, you're like, well, that's interesting. That's contradictory. That's different. And so humans, we just, like animals, we hate not doing our default programs. It's just so cozy to just stay in the warm blankets, eat what we want, do what we want, don't work out, watch Netflix. If you're an IJ, do controlling. If you're an EP, do more gathering, blast. Like it just feels too good. And to be able to stand up daily, and people are just so surprised what it feels like to not be in a default program. It feels wrong. It feels hard. It feels backwards. It feels unmotivating. Your body's shocking you and saying, don't do it. And so it's really hard to really like intellectually know, yep, that's what it feels like. And I got to get up and I got to push through it every day. Or just go with the flow and ride down the same shit tunnel everybody else of your type does. And that's why you want to avoid watching people of your same type critically and go, oh, where does all the last EPs end up? Or I don't want to look down there, you know? So it's hard as hell, but once you get kind of going with it, it does pick up a lot of momentum, you know? It sounds horrible.
Yeah.
It sounds so horrible. It does. And it is. And it is the hardest and it's the worst. But then as you start to build momentum, like Jordan Peterson always talks about, it's not necessarily that it gets easier. It's just that you get stronger. You start to get more momentum. You start to kind of build habits. You just have less resistance. You're like, all right, let's go do this. And then at the end of the day, you do get, sure, there'll be like happiness and dopamine for here and there, but it's a deeper sense of like meaning and fulfillment. And I'm not going to get my ass kicked. And that feels fucking great. It feels better than like a quick dopamine spike that you then pay for later, you know?
So what I want to do next, though, is I do want to get back to this.
Yeah.
I do want to kind of directly address this because I talked to you yesterday and I was like, I kind of pegged what you were saying as like, okay, what you're kind of preaching is heroic nihilism. You know?
Yeah, sure.
Taking risks to do something meaningful with your life. And the way Jordan Peterson kind of apparently lays this out is that like in our current day, the three others than heroism are teaming up against heroism. Do you see that, or is he like I kind of see an imbalance here, so I'm like maybe he's not seeing it something.
I don't know. Yeah, tell me more.
Like for instance, I was thinking about the taking risks. I'm like, oh, you know, taking risks is what heroes do, but it's also what villains do and psychopaths do, you know, like that same gene to take risks. From studies, it's just like I wonder if you heard this, but like from my studies in psychology, when I minored in psychology, it was psychopaths have some weird trait where they don't feel regular pain, like psychopaths don't feel regular pain. They don't respond to punishment at all. They only respond to rewards. They rarely feel emotion, but if they do feel emotion, it's usually just rage.
Sure.
Like full sociopaths. Actually, no, sociopaths don't. Or psychopaths, the worst one, don't feel any emotion. Sociopaths do. And there is one guy on YouTube who I will send you to later. You might want to type him. Is that he was typed as a sociopath, and then he became a religious apologist, like debater, and he literally like went to prison for taking a hammer to the back of his stepdad's head.
Wow.
And then he like turned around, has a wife and kids and a few disabled children, and it's just bizarre.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, is he really a sociopath, or like I don't know. So,
sure. Yeah.
Weird stuff like that.
The fact that he can change it or turn it around. Yeah.
But he said that he was debating and he was like, oh, I couldn't, the logic made sense to me. I was arguing against it and the logic of Christianity made sense to me. And it was like, and I'm like, okay, maybe, but
Sure.
I find like I was wondering, I was like, can that religion, is it designed to socialize him?
Yeah.
Something like that. But yeah, I'm sure I'm just talking like this, but
No, yeah, it's an interesting thing. I do find it very fascinating. It's studying people that are like that are like hard in some kind of a disorder, sociopath or narcissist has been the one I've been studying lately. Thanks to TikTok, I'm figuring out how
thanks
to.
to TikTok,
I fucking
because
love that
Andrew's
app.
hating your feed, right?
Yes, he is. Yes, he is. Yeah, he is. But the sociopath or the narcissist one has been great. That's been the one I just recently kind of finished up diving down that realm. And one of the guys that I was following on TikTok, I didn't realize this, but he was an ENFP guy, and he had a lot of really good information on narcissists and stuff like that. And then it turns out he used to be a narcissist. I was like, what? Like I couldn't quite process that. Yeah, he used to be a narcissist. So he's telling all this good information on how narcissists work, which is consistent with everybody else that's teaching about narcissism. A lot of people I was following are people older. They're probably like in their 50s, and they've come out of some relationship that they were with a narcissist for 15 years or whatever. So they have a lot of experience, and they've done a lot of research and blah, blah, blah. So I'm watching quite a few of them. But yeah, I was surprised. I'm like, wait, this guy was a narcissist and now he's not? And that was something I was trying to make sense of. And I haven't seen a lot of that in the data. Usually what we will see from our point of view is, we'll find some killer in the news or whatever. And then we find out their type and their social type and their upbringing. And we're like, oh, that makes sense. That's all normal. Yeah, that makes sense. Again, a lot of times we'll see the people that'll have the narcissistic traits or sociopath or something along those lines, where they'll have just lack of empathy for people. And we'll kind of look at them like, oh, well, you're double masculine, you're number one, and everybody of your type feels like that to some degree. Now, we do see, though, that what we've kind of always defined, and we're not fully like knowing what the hell we're looking at, is a lot of the disorders are just extreme all in on whatever deck of cards they have. So people that are narcissistic or sociopath or whatever, it's everybody of their type is like that, but their mommy raised them a little bit right, or their growth mindset, and they'll have those feelings or those tendencies, and they'll learn to balance. Donald Trump is a good example that we use of like, he's somebody like right now, like if you and I were like, we're trying to like go, it's almost like double the siding, but across a lot of different fields. It's like trying to like move and adapt socially, where somebody like Donald Trump is like all in on one, masculine, number one, blah, blah, blah. So he's like all in, and like, it just doesn't change gears. We call it changing gears. So when somebody is able to flow through different states, different functions, there's a time you need to be pushy, there's a time you need to be movable. That's somebody that seems be a little bit more growth mindset versus somebody who's like all in on their traits, But then last point, we do come across documentaries of like parents are like, look, our kid was just fucking born this way, and they're just locked in, So I guess there's one, in my opinion, it just seems like everybody has a personality disorder. From what I'm looking at, everybody's fucking nuts. It's just what kind of nuts are you? And there's somebody who's opposite nuts of you. And if they're the ones writing the psychology books, they're gonna, all the OCD people is calling everybody ADD. That's just because they got to the books first, so you lost.
No, I totally hear what you're saying about the ADD stuff. I was diagnosed with ADD, and it's just like I decided, I don't want to be on this anymore. Went to my SI job, and just every day they're like, you're never late. It's like it's like if you're a waiter or doing something where you're running around, is ADD a problem?
It feels like Planet of the Apes, where it's like whoever got to the textbooks first, they win, and the other group lost. So it's like if the ADD people, let's see, that's kind of contradictory, because they like who writes the books? Like whoever writes the books, they get to decide who's normal, not normal. And it's like, but then you go get to know them. You're like, no, you're fucking psycho over here. You're super controlling over here, or not knowing the abstract or whatever that their opposite deal is. So crazy is on a spectrum. There's an opposite. So just real quick. So the most people that I see, where they're crazy and they have a disorder, I'm like, no, they're just opposite of you. They're actually very normal for their type, and you're crazy, But there are people that we do see that do. It's very, very rare, but we do see people that are like born extremely with something very off about them that seems to be something they're born with. But it's way more rare than people realize, I think. Does that make sense? Because everybody thinks everybody's crazy, but they're not. It's just humans have a wide spectrum, and you're
So I
probably looking
mean,
at somebody
like
opposite.
the I have a friend who's a psychologist,
Mhm.
and maybe she's like lead any like me, and so she's just complaining about the categories. But
Yeah, yeah,
as I talk to psychologists,
yeah,
they go, you know what, these categories are kind of like anything could fit in them.
yeah, yeah.
And I'm like, okay, well, look at the incentives. Like, okay, well, you're a psychologist. You need patience, and you just keep expanding and making the
Right,
category more
right,
vague, like a horoscope.
right, right, right,
And then we throw drugs at it, and it's
right,
like, okay, now you're just medicated. Did you ever get any working on yourself to
right,
like, if I just keep taking ADD medicine, how much am I actually self-focusing?
right, right.
How much am I actually disciplining my mind to focus?
Just because we love tangents, just one of the, watch how I cover my ass here. It doesn't matter, but watch.
Mhm.
One of the variables I see with the medication is I do understand the overuse of handing out medication from a business point of view. So it being a personal trainer or working in some kind of coaching field where you're like the professional, like stuck at your desk, and you have all these people coming in, and they're like, I saw this with my friend who was a doctor. I was talking to
Mhm.
him, and he's like physical doctor, and he's like, God, people just abuse their body, and they come in at the last minute with their body falling apart, and they're like,
Yeah,
hey, give me a pill. You're like,
yeah.
dude, you're eating Twinkies every day, like, but they're like, the customers won't leave. Like, this happened to me. Like, I had this was several years ago. When I was prepping for doomsday and stuff, I'd walk in the creeks barefoot.
Mhm.
This is what I used to do when I was your age.
Okay.
And that's why, of course, I got some toe fungus thing, just some athlete's foot or something. And so I went to the doctor, and so, like, there was actually nothing wrong with my foot, but I was just like washing it too much, that the toe was like getting too cold. So just like, it's basically like what needed to be done, which fixed it, was just stop over controlling it, leave it alone. And so he's trying to tell me that. I'm like, no, you don't understand. There's something wrong with it. He's like, no, I think there was, but I think you healed it. You're now just washing your foot too much. Just stop, just leave it alone. Chilblains, he called it. And I'm like, no, dude, you don't understand. You don't understand. And he's like, and I literally saw this happening, and I still fell for it. He's like, okay, one of these. And he's like, all right, just like totally mocking me while I'm doing. He's like, let me write you a prescription. I'm like, that's better. You better write me a prescription. And just wrote me a prescription for, like, vitamin B or some fake thing. I still have it, just to like teach myself a lesson. It's like, okay, go to the pharmacist and get this. I'm like, okay, thanks. That's right.
Hey, that's actually really good for you.
Yeah. And it was just a placebo. He's like, here, get out of here, you idiot. But like,
Hey,
I wouldn't let him
placebos are
leave.
effective.
Right. Like, I wouldn't leave until he gave me my medicine, even though I didn't need medicine. I just needed to like have proper foot care. And then once I figured that out, stopped over controlling it, it went away. So I see the fact that I do that, everybody does that. I feel like, so from the doctor's perspective, they're like, when I talk to doctors to some degree, they're like, look, I don't like handing out medication left and right, but people come to me with all this baggage, all these problems, all these issues. And again, this is at scale. Your specific issue might be different. Disclaimer. But they're like, I don't know what to do. I just got to get people off of me. And that just kind of creates this cycling loop that people are demanding it.
So there was this one guy who was a therapist for 7 years, and actually like trying to do the right thing. I was watching his video, and he was saying like, um, basically he was complaining about like how the system works, and I think they were very valid complaints. And he said, well, one, psychologists learn to push away anyone who actually has real issues. There's a barrier up between them and the other person. But like, whenever anything gets a bit too hard, what they say is send them to psychiatry, and they say you're getting a higher standard of care.
Yeah.
That's what they say, and it's just part of the system now.
Yeah.
And this guy was saying like, I couldn't stay in there because I was just taking on so many people. I couldn't have relationships. I was listening to people who were just like, usually they're just like, send them straight to the hospital if they say anything dangerous.
Right.
And he's like, what I found that these people actually needed was someone to just listen to them, and I wouldn't tell them to go to the hospital first thing.
Right.
And his conclusion was like, this kind of, and it was kind of something I took naturally myself, was this kind of therapy needs to actually just be more distributed in society among people, which is what I tried to do. For some reason I was like, I don't want to go to the therapist. I want to talk
Yeah,
about.
right.
I want to talk
Just
about
to
this.
get but people just skip all the basics, you know. So I do think that the modern medicine and psychiatry and drugs and stuff is like one of the most useful tools that we could have. So just to do an analogy, it's like in men's health or in women as well, as you get older, you know, approaching my age, like one of the best healthiest things you can do is actually go on the drugs and hormone replacement
Mm,
therapy. You know, it's something that I will be doing. I'm trying to push it off till 50. So
mhm.
using the analogy of if I had me personally or anybody in my family, if we had a serious chemical imbalance mentally and couldn't stay stable, which is true for a lot of people. It's just like with health. I don't think you should be taking steroids at 21 just because you're skipping the step. But it doesn't mean that you don't take steroids. Maybe you're older, maybe you need it. But it's just like the point is that people are kind of largely skipping the basics, letting small problems grow into larger ones, not having a solid foundation, and then just hoping that the drugs will save them. And then they'll swing of either
Yeah,
like all
yeah.
do the drugs or no drugs at all. But it's just back to kind of like the larger topic of like, hey, it's like some of this, like we want everything as much as possible to be a set it and forget it. But it's like there's so many variables, especially too, like getting older, like trying to track my fitness. It's like I'm trying to dial in a moving target. So as soon as I get one diet plan figured out, now I'm 5 years older. Now it changes, and so medication might have worked in the past. Now it doesn't. Then it works again, and it's really really hard to be able to track all that yourself. To have the expertise on that yourself. It's just back to like the fact that we all live as individuals and we don't work as a tribe anymore. Like, what do you do when you have to take on a complex problem? You know,
I
how
mean,
does Dave get help for his foot when the only one he listens to is Dave? You know?
here are the things that are like coming out. Like there are things that are like SSRIs are as effective as placebo for depression. Like for me, I was given seizure stuff and antidepressants for emotional swings I was having,
Yeah,
which were on a clock, and I can catch like I can catch them now. But you know, I was in psychology and I read a thing. It was like, well, studies show that literally antidepressants plus this have no effect. I'm like, well, why did I get prescribed this extra
yeah,
thing? And you'll hear
yeah,
these comedians come on and talk about, well, you know, you sometimes they're just, it's like, is it really that scientific? I hate to like, maybe disclaimer, I'm not telling everyone to get off their meds. I'm not doing that. But I'm like, there's this comedian talking about like, oh, I found out what I had after I read the 10 drugs and what they're used to do.
yeah.
They didn't even
Right.
tell them what they were being
That's funny.
diagnosed with.
That's
Like,
funny.
it's so bizarre.
Yeah,
And it's
yeah.
like, oh, well, we'll try this out. Well, we'll try this out. Well, we'll try this.
Yeah,
Well, we'll try this out.
you can't like
It,
you can't just take your car to the shop and be like fix it. They'll be like okay, and then now they get to have free reign. Like you gotta, and it's not that you have to know how to work on your car or your body or your mind, but you gotta have some. You're responsible no matter who you are. At the end of the day, it's like everybody's doing what they can. You know, the doctors are doing what they can with what they got. They may be extremely overwhelmed, and
and
you know,
well, the thing is, I think one of the possible applications of OP into the future is, you know, if you get these psychologists and you get
yeah,
these pharmacists and you go, hey, what's going on? They
I
go, we
know.
don't know what's going on.
You know, they're definitely like yeah, just going maybe in my lifetime in the future, it would be getting a foundation of people having their profiles, just like 23andMe. It's just like your blood work. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it's like, oh, no wonder your skin this, you're allergic to that. You're like, oh, I would have never figured that out. Like, and this is happening in like every scientific field except psychology. Like, can psychology not get halfway caught up with every other fucking field, including genetics and allergies? So like to get every person or whoever wants it, like their profile as young as possible. So they're like, what? That's weird. Like, trust me, you're going to want to know this in the next 20 years that you're going to have these imbalances that start stacking up both in life and then, which is, yes, chemical imbalances. That's how we see it, like hormones and stuff like that. Doesn't mean you need to balance those. Now you're just like sterile. You want to have a little flavor to life, you know? But
Well,
it's great to know that like to give people a starting point. Just real quick, what I also see is give people a defense against their doctor, because one of the things that I see very strongly every time I look is most if I go to, I can hardly do it. I only do this a couple times a year, but I consistently do it. It's just like watching Live Leak. It's just to fuck with myself, just to get myself really mad. I'll go through Psychology Today and I'll type the people that are counselors in my area. You know, the blue haired lady you know, the ENFP lady that's here to help you overcome the controlling abuse society has put, and the EJ lady that's here to protect you from the narcissist, and the IJ guy that's here to protect you from, like, they're just only spelling out to an insane cartoon character level degree, just spelling out their type. And now they have little videos where they'll play, and it's just these scared kids that are psychologists largely. Again, there's a lot of good ones out there, but they're just spewing their type. And so what I see is when you find people that are like, oh, I love my coach or my psychologist or whatever, it's like, oh, well, that makes sense. You guys are a good match for each other. But then other ones are not. And so many kids, so many people are walking in and their psychologist is like, oh, there's something wrong with you. It turns out this one's an IJ, this one's an EP. And so it's just, so way off. So if you get somebody to get a grounding of like, hey, this person is fairly normal for their type. I know that's offensive to you. I know that's shocking to you, but they're fairly normal for their type. They're having some small imbalances here. Don't try and like fix their larger being. You know, you'll see a DI going, stop being DE, or a DE going, stop being DI, or a number 1 saying, stop being a number 4, like fundamental fights. Like, no, don't fight that. Just help the little stuff, you know, before it gets larger. So yeah, I see that a lot. just
well, didn't you say something like a lot of like the TED Talks are just like people just discovered their demons or something?
That's
like
another good example, right? It's just them spouting their fucking saviors.
Well,
that's why we mock the shit out of it.
I find it so funny that whenever you ask people like what their ambition is, there's like, do a TED Talk.
Yeah, get a LinkedIn badge. Do that. Get a LinkedIn badge.
It seems like a very free place. Or like
feels very Pharisee to me. Just something short term. It's the ones that are the best, and you'll see them on TED Talks, and you'll know them when you see them, is when you see the EJ preaching self-confidence, self-discovery. Like, okay, there we go. That's what I'm looking for. Or the IJ preaching, hey, you got to take in, you got to do new, you got to go with the flow. You're like, oh, there we go. But it's just, I don't know, it's 1 out of 10 or less often, you know? So it's like, it'd be the very same message, you know? Like whatever you have to say about gathering, I don't really want to hear it. I want to hear everything you have to say about control. But then it'd be the same message. But if it's coming from this person, it's already compromised because they're just preaching their saviors. When you listen to somebody coming from okay, I went through hell and I discovered this, and it's just their demons, you're like, okay, I'm listening. You get that balanced view, you know.
Okay. I think I see what the chat's talking about. They're talking about schizophrenia. And they want to hear about some of the stuff that
schizophrenia. Yeah, that's a hard one.
So yeah, I ran some stuff by you, which were some weird theories that kind of pop up in psychology. This is from the notes we had. This is on track, but the basic theory was, you know how in the OPS code, you have a masculine and feminine side.
Yeah.
And my hypothesis is, well, biology doesn't play games like that. Biology will give you, you know, crazy stuff way out on the spectrum, you know. And even if that, so like the normal masculine feminine thing would be a normal person in a sense. And so if biology found an advantage to have 2 masculine observers,
yeah, I thought about that.
It might throw that out there.
Yeah.
So
you brought that up yesterday. Yeah.
For autism, there's like I don't know if it's a third or higher functioning.
Yeah.
And then 2/3 are usually have issues, and the higher functioning ones then will have savant syndrome where they have
what's going on there. Yeah, what's going on there?
Extreme memories. So it's just like, do they have 2 masculine? And the other thing is that I think Jordan Peterson uses this he uses this example. He goes, and I've asked autistic people with diagnosed autism about them. I went, when you were young, Jordan Peterson said, like, so if they walk into a kitchen and you move the chair, they don't see, you know, chair moved in the kitchen. They see entirely new environment. And handing it back to you, your analogy about feminine intuition, feminine NI and masculine SE, you said masculine SE is like the boulders and the intuition is the river flowing through it. So if, let's say they were both masculine, both that was up, it'd be like boulders in the river and then gravel.
Right.
flowing through, causing you, I can't even process this.
Right.
And actually, I put this in there. I asked some people in OPS about who said they had autism. And one person, Benjamin, insisted that it wasn't type related. And I wonder what he means, if this means by temperament or anything. He said it simply is not being able to process information at a certain level. And I go, well, what would be harder? It would be harder to process new information if it was all masculine.
Right.
Possibly.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I think I know what you're saying. So the what I've thought about is like, I'll see, like I was saying earlier, it's like a bell curve. So it's like you have the normal people in the middle. And I think today everybody thinks everybody has a disorder and everybody's crazy or has something wrong. And I'm realizing that's not, most of the time people are looking at people that are just opposite or you don't understand them. And so most people are definitely crazy, but they're subjectively crazy they're very normal. Just 99% of the people that I come across are completely normal according to everyone else of their type. Now they're just a crazy type, right? So, and that's, I'm just seeing like it might be like literally once, I'll see thousands of people a year. It's maybe like once or twice a year. I'll be like, okay, that person is definitely weird, even according to 50 other people of their type. That's when things get interesting for me. And that's just very, very rare, but it does happen. My brother's kid, my nephew, he has like legitimate autism, can't talk or only says a word or two. And I think he's like 12. We'll go in and like flush the toilet 50 times. You got to lock him out of the bathroom. So like autism all the way, like not going to be able to function on his own, and so I've always wondered and he's just born with it, and so I've always wondered like, okay, and yes, I can identify his type, and Shan as well. We can identify his type. We believe him to be an audio.
So do you see the feminine side as well, or something?
So I don't. So I don't know. I don't know because like, so for example, say with Down syndrome is a good example. Like they can track. They're like, oh, there's an extra chromosome. Like there you go. There's something actually different. It's not like somebody with Down syndrome. It's like, oh, they're just way in on their saviors, or they're feminine, or it's like no. There's something genetically going on that's different, or they have an extra chromosome. And so I'll see people that seem to be way off. I'm like, no, they're just idiots way in on their saviors, and they're a crazy type. Everybody, that's totally normal, even though it's very scary. But then there are people that will have like legitimate things they're born with, and I do wonder exactly. Is it like double masculine observers, or is there something going on with the code, or is there a different genetic thing going on? It does seem to be that there is something else there that is happening when people are born with something very extreme from an early age that has some kind of a mental disorder or disability or whatever. And also, I think, like Down syndrome as an example, I think just the 512 coins and functions is just the tip of the iceberg. I think there's so many other programs and functions in psychology. So it may be that their masculine and feminines are just fine, but they have some other gene or some other program that we're not aware of in our little box that is switched differently. But again, that is something that shows up in the data. So for example, say with my brother's nephew, it's like I got to wait for the data to pile up to where I have so many people of his type that are going to not have a disorder, but then start to get some that do. And then when I get a cluster of that, so I'm going to have like 1,000 or 10,000 relatively normal to get somebody, to get the repetitive pattern to start to show up in the data several times. That's when we start to be able to get solutions. We're like, oh, now that we have 5 people that all have that of this type, now we can start to see what's going on, which we're able to do that in some areas.
Where do you see the clustering of autism right now?
Autism, we see masculine sensory. It's usually masculine SI. Say masculine sensory, masculine SE, masculine SI. I would say that's the biggest factor we see: masculine sensory, masculine SI.
Like top or bottom, it doesn't matter.
I think the higher the better. It's for autism. Again, you're just going off of Dave's memory, and Shan. I know Shan agrees as well. So our limited set is we do see it's masculine sensory at the top, usually masculine SI at the top, and it's usually ISTJ. It's usually with the T. I think my brother's kid, I think he's SIFI audio. He doesn't talk. It's hard to tell, and I don't see him very often. But but then again too, it's like it's hard to define because it's like you'll get autistic traits that even you and I will have to some degree with the masculine sensory, because you'll do this. You'll like argue over some goddamn fact, like you're driving somewhere and they're like, hey, take the 5 freeway. You're like, it's not the 5, it's the 5A. They're like, dude, whatever. Like your masculine sensory will lock onto something randomly. And like mine does this, and Shan will accuse me of like, compared to Shan, I'm more autistic than her. I'm more weird with the masculine sensory at times, so it's kind of it's back to a spectrum thing. It's really a spectrum thing, and I think very few people have it to such a degree that they're born with it to they're kind of kicked out of the social group. I think what I see, a lot of ISTPs will have autistic traits. They'll be very antisocial because they're blockheads, but what I keep seeing is when they set their masculine TISE onto it, like a couple of years later, I see them, they're growing their hair out, they're fucking hippies, they're in a van, and they're embracing, like they're able to, so like a personality disorder, and I think this is how normal psychology defines it, is you have some weirdo trait that is kind of bumping you out of society, where you're self-destructing, or you're not able to play with others in a normal work area, where it's kind of knocking you out of the social group, and are unable to get a hold of it, but there's a wide range of, you can be quite a weirdo and still society's like, yeah, we'll put up with you as long as you put up with my weird thing, Whoops. Let's kick the camera over. So bump that.
To move this conversation forward,
Yeah.
to then ask about what you're seeing. Are you seeing anything with schizophrenia? Have you seen any clustering of that in type?
I know, like, yeah, Shani knows more about that one. She studied somebody, a famous guy that had that several decades ago, and she's done more research on that one. But I do see, like Sheila was talking about here in the comments, with like seeing the pictures, seeing things that aren't there, and pictures that are bleeding, stuff like that. We'll see S and N on the poles will do that. So the observers, that's definitely where we see the thing with the seeing stuff that's not there. A lot of times it's the masculine NE. The masculine NE can be one hell of a son of a bitch, especially if it's fourth, where we'll see a lot of intrusive thoughts, or hard to know if what things are real or not real. Because like a savior intuition, it's kind of like we're always kind of halfway in daydream land or whatever. Imagine like suppressing that and then having it masculine, and it will create situations that are dramatically not there. I had a buddy in the RC world, Al. He was a great guy. He's an ISTJ. It's probably like blast sleep, play, audio, and very he was great, because I'm always doing all this crazy shit. And I remember him just like looking at my planes. He's like, where does this wire go? I'm like, I don't know. And we just throw it in the air, just sloppy. But he's trying to, like, it just drives him crazy because of our lack of control. But he would have a thing to where, I remember one time I was standing out in the street talking to him, and he said that my face just started turning into like an alien, started just moving, and just like Sheila was describing, like things would just sift around and stuff. And he would have a thing where, stuff would be not real. And it's just like a suppressed intuition, seems like. So we do see that a lot, and the clients that come through and videotyping will hear that. But again, it's like just traces. It's not like they have full-blown schizophrenia, but they'll have little traces of it,
So there are two types of schizophrenia, though. There and this was from college, was there is the hallucinations, and so those are called additive symptoms, and then subtractive symptoms, where it's someone's just like not there.
Yeah.
And they know they're genetically linked because there were quintuplet sisters who were all abused, and they all developed different types of schizophrenia. Like each one developed a different type. One was visual, one was audio, one was I'm not there, like not socially aware, could not hold on to anything. So it's like you talk to them and they're just like, which goes back to like just back to this is the theory. It's like, could that be caused by two feminine observers? But it doesn't start early age. It usually onsets later, like as if it's like Alzheimer's or something like
Yeah,
that.
right.
So might have nothing to do with it, but like that is a weird pattern.
Yeah, very much so. I think
That
there's
lines up with I can't hold on to
yeah.
stuff. You know?
Yeah, I feel like what Shani and I are doing here are I'm just trying to hold the line at getting a foundation, kind of just getting the plumbing laid out of the foundation and get it very solid and get our numbers very good and get our data, our platforms kind of laid out. Because I'm seeing like somebody should get on this if we can fucking track this down. There's so much stuff there. There's so much interesting things there that if every time Shani and I, it's a lot of times it's just randomly.
Right after it, yeah.
Yeah, just come in and like, God, there's so much that we can figure out there. One thing I could say, studying the Narcissists over this past couple of months is Narcissists kind of changed the channel a little bit. Narcissists are a good one because they scare everybody and they seem to be a certain type or whatever. So it's like they're the bad guys and so society will be like, oh, they're bad and get rid of them and don't trust them, and so they'll very quickly treat the narcissists like monsters that can't be dealt with, which is largely true. Like you're pretty much fucked if you have a legitimate narcissist coming after you. It is actually a real thing. It's a real thing.
Yeah.
But getting down to the core of it after you kind of not afraid of it, because I'm more on like the narcissistic side, so I'm not really afraid of them because I'm like I would be a good narcissist going that direction. So I'm not. Not as afraid of them because I'm like, oh, they're just some selfish hurt asshole. They're not that bad. But what I saw in studying it is like it does come back to childhood trauma, and so it's like what I see is like, and this is what Gabor made, and a lot of real psychologists are actually saying is like, yeah, even if I knew how to say it right, I'd still say it wrong. Is that there's a childhood trauma that happens, and from there, the way I look at it is you'll have like a legitimate abuse or subjective abuse or trauma. Like, so for example, my parents were great, but like I had to go to school and church and I had so much sensory overload and 3 younger brothers that my brain was traumatized with just too much sensory and too much chaos. And my family is like, what the hell's wrong with you? And I'm like, well, this is like the best way to fuck with somebody of my type is to put them in that much of a chaotic environment, even though everyone else is happy. Right. So like, this is like how and why I got into the personality and all this kind of stuff. So the point is like, the kid grows up and either they're legitimately abused or they're like subjectively under a lot of trauma, but nobody else knows, because everyone else is like, I'm fine. But like the kid is like super suffering. So the kid grows up with this like broken leg that doesn't heal right. And so there's like and this is all just childhood trauma type stuff. And so then there's all these weird defense mechanisms. And so it's like, I don't know why I don't like electronics and I'm afraid of stuff. Well, it's my type. And then my upbringing now starts stacking and the broken leg is healing wrong, and now I'm just stacking on it. It just gets worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. And so then what becomes predictable is if you know the kid's type and you know how and where they were traumatized, most likely in their demons or whatever, that if they're this set of cards, then they're going to express it this way. So if they're a social type number 1 or DI, masculine X, Y, and Z, and then traumatized at a young age, that type of person is always going to express it through narcissism. This type of person is going to express it through holistic or whatever, that one that's like very FE like. And this type of person is going to express it this way or that way. And so that becomes extremely predictable because that's where you have like a brother and sister and they'll both be in the same environment and both go through the same trauma, but one goes this way and one goes the other way. Well, that's determined by their type. So that makes a lot of sense. And so then you run up against a narcissist and you're like, oh, you're not a scary monster. You're a hurt kid. And if you can learn how to not feed the narcissist because they're playing a game with you, if you can learn how to deal with that and then actually be able to start addressing the hurt kid, it not only gives you a layer of defense that their weapons don't work on you anymore, but you're able to actually kind of get down to the hurt kid. And that's not going to be on their choice and that's up to them. You can't help them do that. But it dramatically makes the boogie monsters fall away and then allows you to look at yourself if you're like, that's why church. I would literally like come home from church like almost throwing up and be so nauseous because I was so drained. I was so every week I was so nauseously sick for years, and my parents just, what's wrong with you? I'm like, oh, that's why. And I still have like a lot of, not now, but like it took me a long time to like really deal with that pain and that not being, what I'm saying? Like, like oh, it makes sense. Yeah. And then it's like, oh, no wonder like I go to weddings. Here's a little processing. dude, if I gotta go to your fucking wedding, man, I'm in the car, man. I'm taking a nap. As soon as you're not looking, I'm sneaking away. It's like I still have this this is where my pain, my fear, my trauma, or whatever is. And so with sensory at the bottom, it's pretty ridiculous. But like, think about everybody has something like that. Everybody has something like that. But it's just usually way worse, So yeah, it feels like a lot of blocks that normal psychology just have not been able to stack it up right yet.
Like the thing is that's why I think the value of this is the psychologists are like, we don't know what's causing it. They all go, oh, it's some childhood trauma, and they have no explanation for the cognition.
Right.
They have no framework for how the human, like they don't have a good framework for how the human brain works.
Dude, the data, man, it's what's great about the data is you could just sit back and let the data tell you. Like I can tell you all about audio ENFPs because we have the most of those, or ESFPs, because I just sit back and I just look through the data. I don't have to say a goddamn thing. Like, I don't want to know what DavePowers says. I'm a consume last NF idiot. You don't want to fucking know what I have to say. I'm a fucking nut, right? Like, objectively, there's like my group's a nutty group. So it's like, I want to know what the data says, and to be able to go through the data and be like, oh, 73% are this, and 28% this, and 98% this, or like, to pull the data from it, that's just like very relieving of like, okay, I can sit back in a backseat, let the data come in. It's just so much data that you've got all these types and subtypes, and it takes a lot of numbers before you could start to see the bell curve. But there's so many answers in the opposites. That's what I see. Like, whatever type you are, there's an opposite type. You are the bad guy in somebody else's movie. Like, everybody thinks.
I'm the bad guy in everyone's movie.
Right? See, I fucking own it. So, but like some people, they just don't think about that. Like, no, you do know that there's a certain percentage of the population that they see you in the grocery store and they run out to their car and hide. Like, they run away. What? No. Like, yeah, you're really triggering people. Like, this person's triggering you. But the point is, like, there's a lot of answers in that of whatever you are stuck on, somebody else has the answer to, and whatever you have the answer to, somebody else is stuck on. When I talk to a lot of people, when I do the Dave audios to them, is like, I'm like, hey, you're like pretty winning in like half of the board here. Be like some decider. They're like, yeah, and people and this and that. I'm like, hey, shut up. You are winning so hard in the world of double observing. I'm like taking notes going, how are you navigating through all this control? They're like, I am. They're like, they're not even noticing that they have access to equations that I'm trying to spend my whole life trying to figure out, how did you get the software downloaded so fast? And when you see that, oh, I have a natural immunity to this that the rest of society doesn't, like, you can get so much self-encouragement from being able to mine those numbers. The way you're able to work out self and people, why can't we work that out with traveling or whatever?
Did you see Uzir's video about EPs at all?
The what?
Uzir, Uzir?
Yeah. No,
Did you see his video about EP problems?
No.
We picked on each type of the EPs.
No.
And I don't know I don't know if Uzir settled on a social type, or if you guys figured out.
I don't know. Yeah.
And but it seemed a lot more down to earth, like problems. And he's like, well, ENFPs, what are your problems? Oh, you're alcoholics.
Yeah.
Like, all this successful ENFPs decide not to drink, and I've ended up in the hospital. Yeah. And then I was like, oh fuck, never more than 2 drinks ever again.
Yeah.
And he was like, oh, the NTPs, what are your problems? He goes, oh, you just have to say it. You just have to say it on social media until half your family and friends are blocking you.
Yeah, right.
And then he goes after the NTPs, and he's like, the SEs, and he's like, you guys are jumping from job to job. Oh, and you ESFPs, you're too cool with people, and then you keep going, why is everyone a snake? Why is everyone a snake? Right. And there are actually like more down to earth, just because we're double observing, like, doesn't mean we don't have or double deciding. It doesn't mean we don't have decider problems.
Right. Totally. Yeah.
It's very true.
Yeah.
Like, wow, that's really down to earth. But like, yeah. I was like, thank you.
Yeah, it's really good. It's really liberating to see the archetypes in something simple like that. Yeah, just take the story. Just stop thinking your story is so damn real. Yeah. Just playing the archetypes. It just takes the power away. It feels so much like just Boogie Monster, or like I don't believe in Santa Claus anymore. When I'm able to see the ridiculousness of other IJs, like this amazing plan that I was just about to jump out and tell everybody about. I'm like, oh, the other IJ just said the same thing I was going to say. I'm going to sit down and shut up. Like it really helps a lot, you know?
So I like, man, I've just been processing decider shit all day. Well, maybe it is just observer shit masked as
No,
decider.
no, totally. I know what you mean. Like some of my largest life problems, and I'll see this with my type, because my type is so, it's like, you know, like in the Bible, they're like, yeah, leprosy, you end up cutting your finger off because you can't feel. I'm like, that's what I'm doing with people. I'm so not afraid of people that I end up fucking my life over so hard. Cause like, I'll just take some horrible person. I'm like, yeah, come on, be a part of the team, friends, no problem. Work out people. And I'll just let bad people into my life that just start causing all this problem. I can't get them out. And I'm like, oh, it's like the lack of fear of people's causing a problem. But the double assigning is like, I don't have a hard time knowing what's going on. I'm like, fair game. I did that. God damn it. Yeah. You know, but with observations, that's where you and I will get stuck, you know, like I'm stuck. I don't know how I got here and I don't know what to do and I don't know what's going on. And there's that unfair feeling with the observations, even though my larger problems right now are actually people problems and not chaos problems.
Because people are the real problem.
Yeah. And they're the ones causing the chaos.
Creating the
So
environment.
that's been a,
They're
yeah,
making the things, they're maintaining the things. That's why they're
right,
breaking, because the people suck.
right. Oh, let me adjust my makeup. We could just edit this out. There we go.
Oh, I'll cover that.
Shanny got me my own brush. Oh God, no.
You just tell me, man. Just tell me.
No, it's
Like,
good.
hey, let's see your pretty face, you know.
Yeah.
Yesterday, you were talking to me about psychopathy and serial killers and where those cluster.
Yeah.
And we got into a bit of a conversation where I was just like, wow, this is pretty dark.
Yeah.
And I like, you're probably going to give me the same answer as me throwing these theories at you. I was just like, oh, there's just the type. They're just running off a cliff. But yeah, so I'll just frame this first and then I'll let you blast and all that stuff. But like, there is an interview I've done that I've not released publicly with Kai, where he admits to some antisocial behaviors. And I was observing Kai versus Habib, right? And Habib was like, hey, you feel anxiety, right? And Kai was like, no. And I don't know if he was just saying that, but he's like, no, I don't feel much anxiety at all. He's like, and oh yeah, he told me a story about, he's like, oh yeah, when was the last time you felt fear? Oh, it was a year ago. A guy came into the restaurant and he was causing a ruckus, and I knew if he was going to touch one of my friends, I was going to do something that my friends wouldn't look at me the same way again. I was just afraid of how my friends would look at me.
Right.
Not actually doing any empathy. And he's not DI, or he like, I've asked him about his type. And he's like, do you see your saviors? He's like, yeah, my saviors are definitely there. And he's a Jehovah's Witness. It's very interesting to hear. Like, he actually gave me some good NF, you know. I was like, what was it? He was like, I used to just think everyone was scum, including me, and everyone deserved death, right?
Yeah.
And he's like, and then I got this analogy. I figured out this analogy of, you know, it's like ink on like white ink on a black page, and is like, I'm just seeing the black bad, but it's the God sees all the good in us. He's just like, look at all this good here. I'm like, that's a lot of solid NF for a sleep last. But like, he just seemed, there's just something a little bit different about Kai compared to Habib.
Sure.
Habib's a social one.
Yeah.
And so I was wondering if you had done the video on like psychopathy, and you had said, oh, it's TI. You know, you had that one research guy who figured out that he was a psychopath in these brain scans.
Sure. Yeah. Or it might cluster in that. Yeah.
Yeah, that it might cluster in that. But there is some weird thing with sociopaths not feeling fear, anxiety, not risk averse.
Yeah.
And I was wondering, like Kai was explaining, he's like, yeah, I asked him, hey, maybe your demons solid? Like, are you quadruple masculine or something? I don't know. Just throwing it at him. Or is there no pain there? He's like, it wasn't easy to do, but I don't know if like it's kind of like trying to interface with this guy, figure out
Yeah.
what is going on in his head.
Yeah.
But do you not see that? Because you were talking to me about
Yeah.
the
No, we see
suicide,
it. See
where
it
they
stuff.
cluster, like the guy who killed all of those people in Montana, or
Yeah. Idaho. Yeah. Yeah. The way we work backwards from looking at the data. So we'll see people that will kill people on the news. And depending on how they kill them, then we'll be like, that's interesting. And if we have enough videos, we'll type them and then log them in their doc, and then find that like, oh, there's like 3 other killers that we've typed over the years that killed people the same way. Haha, that's kind of weird. We're now marking them red. So anybody who's a killer, we mark them red because they'll cluster in certain docs. But it's very much like the LGBT thing, where it's like if you're an audio ENFP male right now out of 50 people, only like 1 or 2 are somewhat bisexual, but most of the males are flaming heterosexual. But then the female versions of that type, it's very the reverse, where most of the females are on the LGBT spectrum. So LGBT will cluster in all of the types once you get the numbers up high enough. So if you're a female of this type, it might be 50% or more, 60%. If you're a male, it might be less than 1%. But eventually, you're going to find somebody of your exact same type that is a different sexual preference, and that may be statistically common or not. Killers are in all types. So everybody, there's somebody out there.
just one bad day away,
Right, exactly. There's definitely there's people that are your exact same type, same social type, same upbringing, and they're in jail because they're a killer. Now, that doesn't say, though, that there isn't a strong clustering of some will do it more. And also the types, the way that people kill is very consistent or common with their types. So, my types like to use, guns. And, the guy that was in Las Vegas, and he went up in the hotel and he had like the bump stock, and he had this whole plan, all that plan shit, and the FBI like took apart his brain. What's wrong with the guy? It's like, he just hates everybody. He just hates everybody. He just hates chaos. This it's what these types are feeling, And so it's kind of working backwards from our point of view is like, I can't believe more people aren't letting loose on their pains. Like, you think like the one killer, well, there's something wrong with him. It's like, no, he just couldn't hold back as much as the rest of us. Society seems to be kind of holding a lot of the wickedness and stuff in our stuff back, But the thing that's hard to define is like with using normal psychology, like sociopath, psychopath, these kind of terms, it's hard to, a lot of the ways that they define stuff is very clumpy compared to when you start pulling apart all the different coins. So it would have to be, first I'd have to take a run at really clearly defining what does lack of empathy mean, or this kind of feeling or that kind of feeling, plus factoring in the person's self-report. I need to have like me and Shan watch this person from an outside point of view, and that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Well, okay. The distinction between, sorry to give you more info, but the distinction between sociopaths and psychopaths is, like a true blue psychopath. I was watching a documentary on it. And he's like, I just got in a car with a guy, like, taxi, pulled a gun out, shot him. He goes into the police station, and there's literally like, they're like, what did you do? Oh yeah, I shot at like, he just has no.
Yeah.
He's not even there. It's like he's not even there. He doesn't realize that's the full psychopathy, which is just like there's no emotional process.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I have seen it. Yeah. So we'll see different. So it's like, it's hard because we'll see that kind of behavior, and we'll see that clustering. But it's back to the LGBT thing. It also like it'll start bleeding out into other types. So it's like, oh, it's a masculine TI thing. It's like, no, we see FIs do that. No, we see masculine TEs do that. So it's a really hard thing.
They'll value talk, but they will not see the consequences of their own action.
It gets really vague, intuitively vague, really fast. What I found, and I hate this, but it's like, it's really got to go ST case by case. Really got to go, okay, let's see this person. Let's see what's going on. Let's see what they said. Let's see what they did. let's get a bunch of videos, let's watch them, let's watch their point of view. What are they talking about? What's their story? Because it's like there's so many different motivating factors of like what led up to that. There could have been abuse that happened. Maybe there's just a normal average Joe type or whatever, and some abuse that happened that set that off in motion. What's more fascinating is when you go to the backstory, like there actually was no abuse. They've always been like this. Like, okay, that's interesting. So it's just a lot of it's why it's like I'm waiting for the clusters to show up in the data, and it takes a while until I'm like, hey Shan, look, there's the 7th one that has this weird story. What are you seeing here? So it's hard for me to say because there's so many different ways to define it. But
one thing I want to ask more about though is you said that these types will like do it the same way, and you mentioned a few types.
Yeah.
So like you said double masculine INTPs. Like what can you explain like how they go about it different from the FIs?
Yeah, we'll see. So it's very much just like if you listen to our typing stuff, it's just everybody's savers cranked up. So if somebody is a masculine IP and they're a social type 1, and they've gone through a lot of abuse, there's a lot of negativity, a lot of this or that, like it creates the traits of like they're, rather than going, all right, I want to put my aggressive conquering energy into my job, which is why we're a big fan of entrepreneurship, because it's very conquering, it's very warlike, it's very like, hey, what do you do with all this masculine fight energy? I mean, I have a lot of that, like into martial arts, and I watch like war movies to relax. Like, what the fuck? Who does that? I watch Fury to relax. I got a lot of this like masculine killer type energy, and I'm just aware of it. I put it into working out, put it into kickboxing, and then put it into movies, war movies, video games. I'm fucking blowing up tanks throughout the day just to get the violence and aggression through the video games, just conscious of it. And then entrepreneurship, I was able to put a lot of the aggressive. I'm like, you know what, fuck everybody. And then I'll put that into the business one. But this has taken me a long time because I used to have, violent tendencies, or very angry, very self-destructive, very depressive, going down a wrong road, So you'll see types that'll have a lot of the masculine and the energy and the DI, and they just don't put it in a good place, and it's got to come out somewhere, and it'll come out through, killing their loved ones or family, or going off at somebody in the bar, or killing for fun or whatever. Like a lot of the, Jeffrey Dahmer, stuff like this, people that just get on these killing for fun kind of sprees,
Well, didn't Shan say Jeffrey Dahmer was a 4? Or
she would know. I don't remember. It's been a while.
She said he went about it in like friends in a dark way or something.
Yeah, I remember her saying that. Yeah, I honestly don't remember. It's been a while since I remember when we were at there's a couple of houses ago that when we started getting into the ops code, we dove down and watched all the killers and all that stuff. I haven't gone down that road in a while, but that does sound right. But yeah, but the point is, like, the way I look at it is this: it's like it's just not surprised anymore. Like, you see somebody that like they killed somebody, they did this, they did that, and then you go hear their story, you hear their upbringing, you hear their type, and you're like, oh, that makes sense.
Do you mind if I grill you on like sensory, like, because I did ask, sure, like how do the NTs versus the SS, like, is it that they did it a certain way? Like, what is the sensory of the difference?
Yeah. So what I can remember, and again, this is what I was telling you earlier, of like, there's so much stuff like this coming up that I'm trying to consume last, not because I'd have to, like, if I really go down that road, there's so much I've got to like start building and framing out. You know what I mean? I'm just trying to get clients, normal people typed. But that is what we're building the team and the systems for. Of like, hey, hint, there's a lot of shit over here. Anybody want to fucking get in on this and manage this? But not something to really dabble into is what I found. But one thing I remember is the DIs they're more of the school shooter type, because the DIs are like, I hate everybody, and they'll see the tribe as just a bunch of annoying lemmings, and they'll just go into a mall and shoot randomly. And now again, you can find DEs that are an exception to that, but we'll see that the school shooter types you'll see a clustering of, introvertism, antisocial, DI is in there. That's very, very common. Where the DEs, man, those are the ones that are like, They're like, this guy, it's this
specific guy. I need to go end that
Yeah.
person. Oh, that
Yeah.
reminds me of oh god, the mother who shot her child's killer in court.
Yeah,
But I
right.
mean, obviously, you know, it was just everyone's like,
Yeah.
okay, we should probably let her off. Something
Yeah.
like that. What happened?
Yeah. Yeah.
She was like, I could
Yeah.
not listen to that man defend himself for a second longer and say that
Yeah.
he literally, like, I'm like, yeah, well, good for you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard too. I think just processing the resistance is I'll also see the so type stuff is it definitely activates your tribalism gene, your racist gene. Just remember when we first started Myers-Briggs, like there was such a divide with sensory and intuition, and we were like, let's see if we can move that. So we've talked about this, where we've deliberately for quite a few years would shit on the intuitives and which is really great. It's funny that everybody here is sensory dominant except for me. It's like the people that are actually better at psychology are sensory dominant, from what I'm saying so far. So the point is like well, that's interesting, and so but it's like that then it just pops up somewhere else, like the social types, and this is a good one, that's a bad one. And so what's really hard is the tribalistic gene, or the branding gene, is that if you take a powerfully emotional experience like a killing, and then you say Charlie Brown, now forever, every time you see Charlie Brown, you have those negative emotions. And so it's hard because a lot of times we don't want to have certain types, get a narrative, this is a person that shot up a mall and they're the same type as you. And then everyone's like, oh, you're a psycho. And then now this poor kid like can't get that reputation off, So we do have to be careful with that. And it's going to be as we get our data and actually have that kind of stuff to where we can stand by it, we do need to have a plan in place to a lot of the stuff that we're seeing is very offensive. It's very traumatizing. It's very hard to process. It's not going to be, it gets into races and everything else. It's like, it's not going to be for the mainstream. It's a hard thing to process at all,
Yeah.
But yeah, buddy,
didn't you find jumpers from one of those shooters?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right.
Was he your type or something, or what?
No, it's Elliot Rogers.
Rogers.
Yeah, I used to. I would watch Live Leak all the time when it was up, and so Elliot Rogers, TINI Sleep Blast Play #1, and visual, and which I know a few other people of that type. Great people, really great people. There's a guy that did a Myers-Briggs channel years ago. Yeah, he had just a very dark individual, and he had killed some people at college, and then he had done a bunch of videos, YouTube videos, and I'd watched them all. And then he just left a long, printout, whatever you call it, manifesto.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I remember like watching that in real time, and then reading over his stuff. And that's when we first discovered the jumpers. Was I'm like, this guy's an ISTP. We know the ISTPs, but
he's so controlling.
He kept consume lasting. He kept. Remember specifically, he's like, I'm going to go to Las Vegas. Oh, and I think he would sign up for Owen Cook's stuff, like the Real Social Dynamics guy. And so like Elliot was doing this consume lasting, where he's just like, okay, I'm going to double down. I'm going to go to this event, and if I can't get a girl, then fuck it. Okay, you know what? I'm going to go back to Las Vegas, and I'm going to put in all my money. And if I don't get it, and so it was just this OI consume last routine, where he was not gathering, which is why he just locked himself. It was largely as this consume last that really fucked him over, is he just got trapped in this loop. And he would always say like, I'm magnificent, I'm amazing, why doesn't everybody love me? So he had this grandiose #1 energy, that he wasn't applying to a positive place, and then was consumed last and couldn't get out of his own fucking loop. And I remember reading this thing over and over. I'm like, how is this an ISTP that has fucked himself by not gathering, not taking in new? He kept going back to the same places, doing the same thing. I'm like, that's what I do. And yeah, that was where we discovered the jumpers, which is why it's like ops and serial killers have a close relationship, because it's like somebody who is overextending that far, they're just an extreme example of what all of us are holding back. They're just somebody who's just all in on their saviors, thinks their demons are total bullshit, won't touch their demons, and just will go only all in on their saviors. And Elliot Rogers is a perfect example, which is why he's so easy to type, because he's would just absolutely shit on ever doing anything new, and doing his functions and stuff. So yeah, man, it's got definitely a. It's why like Carl Jung and Jordan Peterson and nihilism. You gotta have a worldview for the darkness. You know, Jordan Peterson's self-authoring program, consume less, here again, rediscover the wheel. Like that concept of like, hey, look, you're born with a default worldview. If you're an EP, it's this default worldview, IJ, this default worldview, and then like a computer program, you can add on your parents' religion, Christianity, school system, America. So you can throw on a couple of extra default programs, and that might kick it to 25, 30 before your worldview fucking falls apart, you know? And what the self-authoring program is trying to do is like, hey, kid, your life's falling apart because your default run-of-the-muck worldviews are coming apart at the hinges. You got to now build a worldview for yourself. You can take a lot of your own functions and your parents and your Christianity and everything else, but you got to put it together for yourself to where you're getting a worldview that can overlap reality a little bit better. Therefore, you're not being a kid your whole life where every time you walk outside, you're like, oh my God, that's traumatizing. Oh my God, what do I do about this? Oh, what do I do about this? Like, hey, you gotta eventually get ahead of these. You gotta know these are coming. And so one of the hardest things to conquer is like, how does your worldview, how does your FI, how does your identity deal with darkness? And, you know, Mel Gibson's come out with a very hard to process documentary and movie, you know, about child abuse and stuff. It's like every time something bad happens, you need a timeout. You know, like if you are, then when things are hard, then you're the timeout guy. And now it's just back to identity. It's like building a worldview that makes sense of death, dying, torture, everything Jordan Peterson's talking about is like, hey, can you see that how fast in 6 months you would be the Nazi? Like if the fucking world went sideways and we were all in a scared panic state, like you do know how fast we would all be Nazis in 6 months. Darren Brown's trying to say this. History's trying to say this. Jordan Peterson knows this is why he's fucking crying all the time. Like, and so it's a very hard, scary thing. But not being able to process that, then it's always in the back of your mind. It's always causing anxiety. It's always having this underlying fear. So getting a spot for the darkness, you know.
Me and Otim had a really, really good interview talk. And we were processing some of this stuff about worldview and like, or in a sense, how to help people develop right. It's like that they do need more pressure, but he being in neuropsychology started talking about how, hey, there are these things called mu receptors which downregulate pain, or the child needs to experience pain so that it can downregulate it. But if you made a perfect environment for them where they didn't experience any pain, those wouldn't develop and everything would be pain.
Yeah, right.
Everything would be pain.
Seeing that, yeah.
And I think we're like, I'm gonna get into this soon. Is I know I have this shit list of like 7 cultures, but like the bottom one is anxiety culture. And anxiety culture is what tends to happen to civilizations who've pushed away death too much. Like too much. Our problems have been, the barbarians are too far away. We don't know how to deal with this, and it becomes a very feminine culture that then falls to a strong man. So
yeah,
and you see this in history with Rome, where it's like there were these civil wars that went back and forth, and you know the elites, the aristocrats actually won, the conservatives won, and then like there'd be Sulla in charge, and he literally just got politically assassinated. And then Julius Caesar happened again, but it was because the Senate, like he was just becoming too powerful. And then the Senate just went, well, he's too powerful. We have to fight him, but they could never delegate properly. And Julius Caesar was like, he was willing to forgive all of his enemies. It was crazy. He was like, when they found a chest full of all the notes of like conspirators against it, he goes, cover it in olive oil or oil, burn it. They're all on our side now. But then he got stabbed by young, idealistic senators. The older senators were like, no, this is fine. Like, you just placate his ego and he'll keep the republic because of all of our traditions. And what happens is he gets killed, and Augustus Caesar comes up. And by the time he's gone, he didn't have any like true heirs. The Senate didn't even know how to run the system anymore. They only knew the Caesarism and the military. which was the most competent institution at the time. Like, was the military would do construction and stuff, and it's just like I'm just like, oh god, I'm being observant. I know, but but this shit happens.
Yeah, right, yeah.
This shit
The
happens. So
repetitive.
I think I'm gonna pull this up soon, or pull this up right now.
Sheila's making me laugh.
What? The
Sheila's making
chat?
me laugh.
Yeah, she was funny.
Sheila.
Okay. So I think some things to kind of take away if we're gonna look into this, which it's not that important, but what I marked in green, those are not really like part of our Western culture. You know, you will see societies like that. So let's say the aliens come, we would become a fear-based society that would be controlled by power because
I'm already ahead of you.
Yeah, we'd already be, it'd be, you know, the government has to enforce everything by force because we're gonna die or something.
Right.
You know, that kind of happened with COVID, but it was more anxiety.
Yeah, right.
And then shame. I think shame is the biggest interesting one to look at, of shame versus guilt. And I've talked to a lot of people from India, like about like literally like kind of like know that they're from this culture, and I ask them, I go like, hey, what's a shame-based culture like? And that the West really doesn't have a shame-based culture, as in Westerners don't care if something makes the group look bad. Like they're like, I'm doing this. This is on me. I'm going to go against the group. I'll tell you all. And they'll do actions that will make the group look totally bad because it's not about that. It's about something else, you know, some deal. And, you know, I talked to some people from India and they were like, some of them like really resented the shame-based culture. But what I see is the shame seems to be more DE, obviously. And the guilt seems to be more kind of DI. Like when people are talking to God, sometimes they're talking to like DI or something. Does that seem to be the case?
Yeah, right, yeah. Feels like it to me. Yeah. Permission to use their DI. Yeah.
Yeah, and so what you see in these societies is the shame-based ones. It's I was talking to someone at a baby shower from someone from India, and he's like, yeah, what happens is if someone buys a different car, like the mother goes, why don't you have that car? It's like, we got to look good. Whereas us, it's kind of, it's like it's all on you. Like, and if my mother did that to me, I go like, fuck off, you know, like I'm not even gonna listen to you. What are you trying to do? Shame me? Get away from me.
Right. Yeah.
I don't care. We don't have any. Does it make the group look bad?
Yeah. Compared to their culture. Yeah.
Yeah, and what was noted about the shame-based societies is that they can go through famines, they can go through mass deaths, and they kind of just chug along.
Yeah.
Whereas the guilt-based societies, they'll have a lot more. Let's go into this. So yeah, the right there at the bottom, negatives of the shame-based societies: they do not take criticism or admit to wrongdoing. Japan and China do not admit to atrocities they committed. Like to this day,
right? Yeah,
Japan goes the Europeans with the barbarians, even though the Japanese did terrible things, like worse things than the Nazis. There were literally Nazis in Japan, and they were like, "Holy shit! Like we have to stop what these Japanese people are doing." And like it's funny, like there'll be all these other East Asian cultures that are like, they're so evil, like because they did such terrible things. Like I don't even want to repeat them, but like the ways they experimented on people, the ways they just put babies on spikes, like no remorse.
And then it's just all just like we see with Russia and China now. They're like, nope, everything's fine.
Yeah, so China has that too, where it's like the Communist Party. They'll double, quadruple, triple down on anything they say, because they're like, well, the party cannot be seen to have been wrong at all.
Yeah,
very weird. Whereas the guilt-based societies, they're more unstable, but they're much more self-reflective and self-criticism. Like us, the West is all about criticizing ourselves. Very, very much so. It seems like so.
Fascinating thing. It just feels like FE land, watching how cultures will get these weird games they'll play, and then it'll kind of move around, it'll change.
Well, I talked to Habib about it because he's from India, and he's like, yeah, it's weird. Like the shame stuff is like even my DI, my cousins who are I'm pretty sure are DI, they'll still be like averse to the
Yeah.
shame culture,
Yeah.
different cultural thing.
Yeah.
But it does seem that guilt is spreading, but we don't have a God to contextualize it.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so what
I
it
know.
seems like
Yeah.
the root of Western Christian culture before the anxiety culture was
Yeah.
a masculine side, the pride based, which was the borders of Christendom were the borders of what these like nomadic herders conquered, and anything that didn't get conquered by them, this pride based warrior culture, when it came into contact with Islam, was conquered by Islam. So two pride based cultures came into each other, and then what Western civilization had to balance its masculine pride side was the guilt-based humility, you know, which is more feminine compared to the pride.
Yeah.
But now it seems like, do we have that much pride? I'm not sure because pride is very macho, like actually doing shit. Like we're very civilized these days. It's not like if you go back 100, 200 years in America, like they'd have duels, but we don't do that much anymore. And it's kind of split between like the guilt is kind of I think left and right both have guilt, but it seems like the left has a lot more anxiety, and the right just just holds on to the old
Yeah.
Christian
Sure. Yeah.
guilt, and they're just preaching the guilt still. So yeah, I just worry about we were talking about this earlier, this masculine versus feminine worldview that relates to like communism and fascism, which is like the feminine worldview is very nice. It's very self-serving. It's like everyone's nice. And the masculine fascist worldview is like everything is eternal war and super realistic. Like I'm going to look at it extremely realistically. It's like, yeah, well, maybe that's true. Maybe it is a eternal war of genes, war against man. But hey, man, I don't really want to ally with you. You kind of seem like a dick, you know? So
Yeah.
it's like, what worldview do we have? Is because these seem to be breaking apart and going to war with each other.
Yeah. Yeah. Tell me more. What are you concluding towards? What are
I
you
don't
looking
know.
at?
Is there a way to balance this? I don't effing know. Like, what is your worldview, Dave? Is it the feminine worldview or is it the masculine worldview?
Yeah. Right. Um,
Are you looking at everything super realistically, and does that work? Like, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what to say. I'm trying to figure out how do we bridge this thing. I don't want
yeah.
this to blow up
Yeah.
because
Oh,
it's
sure.
like I used to listen to political YouTube. I'm just like, this fucking makes me sick. You just keep talking, and
Yeah. So let me see if I'm. Let me see if I get my NI to track your NE here.
yeah,
Like a
sorry,
paper.
that's a
So
lot.
no, it's really good. So looking at like, we're talking about like a fear of worried that the countries or civilizations are going to fall apart, fight each other, get different issues going on. Is it kind of
Well,
stuff like that?
I guess what I really were like the thing is the feminine worldview just seems to destroy itself internally.
Yeah.
Like even though femininity is free, communist Russia, which was like gave the best view to humanity, oh, we'll all work together. Their military structure, they'd send men into the river by some bureaucratic thing and they'd freeze to death. Whereas in both Japan and Nazi Germany, the command structure was so decentralized. In Japan, the admirals and the generals would politically assassinate politicians who were
Yeah.
getting in their way, and everyone was actually more free, like in the command structure, and they're all after their own pride and stuff. But I really what I'm afraid of is just we've gotten too feminine. I'm afraid of the masculine backswing. Like
Yeah.
how do we allow the masculinity back in and not let it go too far?
Yeah.
I'm
So I think I
afraid.
can I think I can relate to what you're saying as a fellow observer, having a lot of anxiety when I was younger over worldviews or political changes. Like
Mhm.
the time that I grew up was in the 80s. It was very calm. It was very normal. Like 5 years would go by and nothing changed. It was a very boring time, and all we had was like stories of our parents and grandparents, and like there was Elvis, there was the Vietnam War, and then there was World War II, and that's about all you ever heard about. And it was all pretty, the 60s were crazy, I guess. And then in the 90s, things were fun and easy. And then, it was after 9/11 that things started to kind of really speed up and change. And so uh, the fear that I had growing up, like if I was 25 today, I'd be under a lot of anxiety because I hardly had a challenge back in the 80s and 90s, and it was still very
Mhm.
stressful. But what I had to get to for myself, and watching the double observers, the IPs and the EJs, where they kind of really accept that, society might topple this way, topple that way, things are going to change, and really kind of lean into that and be okay. Because I would find that I had some fear that I wasn't processing, like some observer fear, where as long as this doesn't change, or if it changes, or I'm upset or whatever. But when I started to kind of just expand my worldview of like China, I was afraid of China when I was younger, but now it's just in Russia. We were really afraid of Russia in the Cold War.
Wow.
But now it's hey, we had a good run. Well, what if China does take over? Yeah, well, good and bad. It's like leaning into it comes full circle. So for myself, it's like, because as an observer, of course, the thing I fear the most is changes in the economy or culture or wars. Basically, some type of war is basically probably the biggest observer fear of doomsday. And it's like the people isn't that much of an issue. I'll find the cool guys and I'll hang out with them. Whereas all the ESTPs, I'll jump on their truck. And so, but the fear, having some kind of fear of a major economy shift, or however you want to define it. So what I had to do for myself, because that fear still is what my body is built for, especially as an IJ and I, like preparing for a world collapse or a world change or whatever it might be. I find that the best way that I can prepare myself is first by accepting that may come, and I got to be thankful for every year I get older. I'm like, well, I had a good run. If this is it, if it goes over, then oh well, at least I made it to 45. At least I'm not 29. It's over. I made it to 45. I'm trying to get some kind of something to get to release my fear, the fear of loss. Because once I can start to let go of that emotionally, then it feels like it gets me in the game where I actually do stand a chance of bettering myself or making a difference or whatever, as long as I can get rid of that fear. Because if I'm fearing this happening or that happening, then my logic gets all screwed up, and then I'm not actually doing any help. And this is what I'm seeing with the double observers, that they will be able to navigate and get so much growth through COVID or whatever, because they're like, oh yeah, it's a control chaos issue. Anyways, back to becoming a better person or working through it, and they end up not wasting that fear. So that's kind of how I do it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. And there's a part of me, like the real stuff I've been dealing with is social stuff of, man, my ego. Like I had a nice talk with Habib, right?
Yeah,
And Habib would catch me, like in my mind, in my what felt like my internal state. I go, oh, I know I'm not special. Everyone thinks they're special. I know I'm not special. Therefore, I'm special. Like, didn't actually say the last part, and I just let it leak. It's just like my automatic processing would leak out, like, oh, no one else can do this but me. And he's like, Henry, you've talked about doing that thing and you haven't had results. Can you keep
yeah,
talking about that? And I'm like, you got me. You got me.
yeah,
And like, yeah, it's like I'm actually more worried about social stuff. I don't give a fuck about all this stuff I'm talking about.
yeah.
Like,
We see that in the dashboard with the consumed sleep, the tribe, the tribe fear will be real.
it's I don't know. It's like, what does it come down to? And it's like, I don't know. What do I even want anymore? Like, I was telling myself I was so important. I was telling myself I was so important and lying. And I'm like, okay, I used to say I'm too important to die, and now I'm just like, okay, now I can put
Yeah,
myself
right.
in risks because I thought I was too important to die to take any risks. I'm like, I don't give a fuck anymore. I could die. I don't care.
Yeah, it's definitely part of the process, man. It's
Yeah.
definitely it does help. It helped me out a lot studying the tribe, because I felt like as a DI, I'm the only one going through it. And when I started to see that, like, it's a very natural thing in your 20s and 30s to be kind of processing that kind of stuff, with it, it helps to know, like, having a goal of, all right, my goal is to get this resolved. I've got it. I can't go forward until I do get it resolved. So it's like, keep working on it, because it feels like it just doesn't end, it doesn't stop, but it actually does. You actually can get settled in answers for stuff like this. It just takes, a decade or whatever, to where you
Okay.
can get a settled worldview.
Can you give me some advice on just being a one? Because it's like the social stuff feels so hard. Of like, if I'm not the one in charge of the table, it's like I hate it so much.
Yeah.
What do I just? I know what you're gonna tell me. You're just like, you just gotta go do that, make that happen.
Well, it's I feel like the do I still own a bug? You know what, Sheila? My bug out bag has slowly disintegrated. I still have some good items, but it's just like ice melting. Got a really good cold steel machete I'd love to share someday. But I still use it for like gardening every once in a while, or hitting the berry bushes. But I feel like with the social stuff, I encourage people to look at things like a coin at a time. So rather than like social type one, that's like, let's like a large clump. It's more like identity over friends or whatever, and then just trying to like take apart that coin. Like I like to personally, with my DI, is I'd like to leverage it against itself. So same with like my OI. It's like the best plan I could come up with is the one that factors in chaos. Now I know that sounds silly, but like I actually figured that out many years ago, and I actually use it all the time, and it helps me a lot. Like Shani and I are going to go down to LA. It's like to be nothing but just pure chaos, and I'm like planning for that, and it's helping me so much. So it sounds silly, but it helps a lot when you turn it back on itself. So it's like, as a number one, as a DI, let's say, it's like, don't you want to be the type of person that isn't stressed out about this, and this, and is actually more easygoing? So it's like you start to make that part of the goal, is what I found, because it is the overactive, out of control drive of whatever that savior coin is. So if the overactive drive for the one is responsibility, and I'm the only one that can save everybody, and I got to put my name on it, and the pressure's on, it's like, it's like, great, like own that, and then flip it back around on itself to try and calm itself down. So that's what I found to do.
Well, one of the reasons I started doing interviews is because someone in the community forwarded me an audio that was sent to Reggie. Advice for being a one, which was get down in the dirt, listen to people's stories, know what they're going through. And what's funny is I did feel like when I actually listened, I felt like I learned a lot. But then I'm like, after talking to you, I'm like, what am I snapping back to? What am I doing? I don't know.
Yeah, it's a process, man. It's definitely a process. I gotta tell you, it helps. Again, it helps going and really studying people that have gone through it, and keep working on it. But it's not something. It's taking on the challenge of like, look, evolution doesn't want you to see this or solve it or figure it out. It wants you to just stay naive and think all your stuff is real, and see if you can find something that works out.
Are you sure that evolution wants that? Are you sure that like this breaking process isn't just a natural hero's process? Like it's against evolution?
It seems to be, just looking at people that are just looking at through the Donald Hoffman lens, the beer bottle lens, the termite lens. Like, you're given this mechanism that works brilliantly in all the other species of animals, where the termites with these wings are given this, and like everybody just goes out in their direction. Like, I'm watching people that they have these amazing lives, and like everything's easy, and it's very rare. But when I look at them, it's just like their type, their social type, their upbringing, their job. Mark Andreessen, I was just doing a class on him. Like Mark Andreessen, just like everything in that guy's life, just like lined up. It's like, what? I'm like, God damn, like it's very rarely do you see that. So with that kind of, way of looking at things, that there's somebody in the opposite end of the world where just everything was backwards, everything was hard. And evolution's like, I don't care. I'm just going to keep sending out people and, random types. Or we'll see types that come through that are, like an EJ that's a number one, or something that's just very upside down. And evolution just seems to be just throwing stuff out there. Sometimes it hits, sometimes it doesn't. So the self responsibility of like being thankful for, okay, I got this deck of cards, whatever it may be, and whatever is randomly worked out, great. You might have some things that are randomly working out, but then all the things that are not, or as the decades roll on, as things don't, it's like, okay, you're going to have to take responsibility and do something about it, you know? And that's with people living so long, it does seem to be as well that like every 10 to 15 years, it feels like life kind of, you get a new restart, you know, like every 10 to 15 years, it's like you got a different set of friends, you got a different set of health issues, you got a different point of view in life. Like, so life keeps, you have like several lifetimes you got to win at, and you might just randomly win at teenagers or being a teenager, 20s, 30s, or 60s. But some decades, the deck of cards aren't going to line up, you know? So yeah, I very much do view it that way. Evolution's just kind of throwing it out there. You might get some lucky coins, you might not. And it's up to you to bridge the gaps on the stuff that's off, you know?
You know what I realized as you were asking me, like, what are you trying to get at with all this stuff? Is I was like, oh, here's my spiel. And I was like, oh, my spiel is bullshit. That's not going to happen. You know, I'm like, let's make a new culture. Let's make a balanced culture. I'm like, wait, that's not how the world works.
Yeah.
One beats the other.
Yeah.
And you can just ride the wave of whichever side's going to win.
Yeah. I try and I'm up to some sneaky shit. I'm trying to back. So being somebody that's charged the world too hard when I was younger as a sleep blast play, right? And got my ass kicked. I'm like, okay, so I back up, but I still want ego. I still want to do stuff. I just don't want to get caught anymore. I don't want the tidal waves for it. So I play cool where I step back. I'm like, I'm zen. I just go with I'm just an observer. I'm just looking at the data. And then when no one's looking, and when it's late at night or early in the morning, I just take my helicopter and I just tilt a little bit forward. And then as soon as everybody wakes up, I stop and I'm like, I'm not doing anything. I don't give a shit if the Chinese take over. I'm not.
I don't think the Chinese are going to take over.
Or what?
I think America is going to stay in power for the next 80 years.
Insert whatever the scariest fear is that's coming around the corner. I make sure that I'm not afraid of it, but then I'm also trying. It feels like windsurfing or something, where it's like largely I'm not in control. But if I'm clever, I can wiggle the thing just a little bit and take these little opportunities and move aheads. And then just when I get blown back, I'm like, oh, didn't catch me. You know, that's what I've kind of found to balance all the on or off kind of energy I'd have over life, you know?
Hey man, are you sure I'm a 1?
I never said you were, but
you said you were seeing it. So
I think I was. Did I? And then that's my feminine. Did I really? Did I say that? So yeah, it seems like it. That makes sense. Whoever said that makes sense. Yeah. If you've got the frustration, that does feel like you're carrying a lot of. I don't want to say unnecessary. That's just my point of view, but it does feel like you're carrying a lot of weight of the world pressure. You know?
Oh, that gets to me when people say, "Oh, the weight of the world on my shoulder." I'm like, "Oh," and I'm like, "Yeah, but what am I actually doing?" So I'm like, "Am I this? Am I congruent? Am I actually?"
No, if you're a number 1 and you're a mope, that's a hard one.
That's what I fucking thought.
Yeah.
Just trying to tell people that. Not firepower. You don't have to.
I would desperately be studying people that are successful mopes. I'm trying to always figure out, like, how the hell is Bill Gates doing this and Elon Musk, and like, how are these mopey guys like doing so much conquering energy? There is an interesting thing about the mopes that we'll see that a lot of the top people out there are mopes. Kobe Bryant, Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, Bill Gates, Shaquille O'Neal, Michael Jordan. It's like there's something about the outside world becomes their inner world. I'm not sure what's going on or what they're doing.
Yeah. I've kind of felt that happening as I was like doing the interviews, where I was like, oh, and I was like, oh yeah, this is easy. Actually, this is interesting. This is fun.
Yeah.
But
I'd strongly encourage. I've gotten so much. I think you and I are similar as NFDIs with Demon Tribe, like getting the sensory on the tribe, like your life depends on it, like going out and really looking.
Man, like, but sometimes they're so wrong.
Right. I know. But it's like, what I'm saying is, like, I started doing that years ago, and I still do it every day. Like every day I'm watching the tribe. It's like a practice that I can never get enough of knowing that my practice has got to be, what is the damn sensory of the tribe? And I've got it. It feels like it's like I'll load it at late at night or in the morning or sometime. And then like I'll need it several days later. Like I'm in a tight spot and then it'll bubble up. And at least I got the information rattling around inside there that I don't even remember consuming, you know? Because yeah, you gotta get to a point of somewhat of certainty to where you can see a path ahead of your life does make sense with all of these variables factored in. I'm a number one, I'm mopey, I'm this and that, all these challenges, and to where there's still something that makes sense, you know, even though it's hard. It's just a hell of a struggle. You just keep going.
Well, I mean, one thing was I was like realizing was I was like, I said I was going to write this book and was going to do all these amazing things. And I'm like, well, now I don't believe any of that. I'm like, well, I still got to go write that book just because I didn't want to do it, just because I was avoiding it for so long. Like, I still got to go back and write that book just for the hell of it, like to prove that I can. Just like,
Yeah.
It's just the book is just my saviors and processing like literally. The book was literally putting all that stuff I was giving to you, like all the stuff about mental illness. It's like magic about mental illness, stuff about the cultures being gods and spirits haunting the people, the masculine, feminine fighting, like all this inner world stuff. And it's just like, it's all in my head and you're not doing the sensory work to make it real.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, I thought I was going to use AI to do it. And then I was like, yeah, actually, that's probably not going to work. But let's move on to AI.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's I got to get going pretty soon. Let's,
you do?
Yeah, let's move
Part
it
two?
along here. Yeah.
But yeah. But if you got to get going.
No, I got about another 15 minutes or so.
Let's close it up and say bye to everyone.
All
Thanks,
right.
everyone.
Want to take any quick tribe chat? How's everybody doing out there?
Yeah, how is everyone doing? They were asking questions about talking about autism, schizophrenia. What do you want to click on it? Or wait, can you click on any of these?
Yeah. So anybody in the chat, if you got any random questions, if you would just chat them back out. I'd love to jump on them real quick. Yeah, I saw on your notes as well, AI. That's a good one. Definitely seeing that as I love that AI has come to us with the Chat GPT. So it's just like everything's just waiting on us. We were originally going to go like trying to build up a team of people, get a bunch of extra money, send people down to San Francisco, work on it for a couple of years, you know, just like one more big giant thing to do. And now it's just like, especially having the double observers here, they're in on the Chat GPT and looks very doable, you know, getting the AI to track, probably start with like a coin at a time, let a friend do it to some degree, you know, getting some understanding of it's not just a here AI do my homework for me. It's still going to be work and honing it in. It helps too with doing the classes, like having to get like I'll be typing somebody for a class and be like, I can kind of tell what type they are, but I need to prove it. You know what I mean? Like I need a really good coin. So I feel like that's helped to where I can kind of get stuff to where it can be feed the machine good examples of consume versus blast or whatever.
Yeah,
seems doable. I just need just to get anything done right, man. You gotta have somebody sitting there fucking working on it until it's done. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, you were talking to me about that earlier. About like, yeah, you'd love to work on AI, but you gotta get the social media stuff off.
Yeah, right. Because to get anything done is just so much work, so much ownership.
You've been saying that it's like hard to hire people.
Yeah. I'm definitely learning the hard way, like I always do. Like why why every boss is like, what's your resume? What's your experience? I'm like, oh, that's dumb. You just have to like the person, and then people are easy. You can just train them as you go. It's like, well, it turns out that's not true. Like you really do need to have experience and a running start in somebody's identity. Has already got to be on the thing. Like if nobody's done YouTube before, and a lot of times it's because they have something in their identity where they're like, I don't want to do that, or I don't want to be on camera, or I don't want to edit or whatever, and it just ends up being a horrible thing. But like finding people that are already accepted. Oh yeah, I do editing, or I do this, or I do that. It's so much easier. Like, great, can you do it over here? So we've shifted our focus more towards that of finding people that already have experience in these areas. But then the thing with that is then the price goes up, so then you start to figure out your yeah. So it's something I accept, like how impossible it is to get through the startup stage, but I know enough about business that I'm like, oh, this is just the hardest step. Like you get the proof of concept and you just have a couple of people here, and you get the first 10 is impossible. Then it gets easier from there. And it's just impossibly hard. And I accept that. And I only have to do it once. And once we get it moving. And some good news is, we got our buddy Michael here. He's doing really good. And he's starting to own stuff more, starting to kind of, start to do his own brand and stuff like that. We got another person on the way later this year. They've also got some experience. So we're getting a trickle in. And, we have a lot of people that want to work here, but it's like there's a lot of different things that got to line up of kind of got to hit the ground running, so to say, to some degree. So it's slowly getting there. Lucas, let's see what Lucas is saying.
Here, I'll put this on the screen.
Hey, thanks. Do you think that everyone is destined for a hero's journey, or is a hero's journey only for a few? Would you say your hero's journey is separate from growth mindset? Okay, that's a great question. I love to cover that one. I'm seeing with studying the tribe, the hero's journey is something that happens on a small scale. So if you're 25, you've gone through some type of hero's journey compared to when you're 16. So it's not just one thing, right? It's like a stages of grief process, where you're going through this traumatized state and oh shit, and then you learn and you got to adapt and grow and then come back. So this is happening all the time on a smaller scale. Now, when we're talking about like the hero's journey, it's usually like this happens so large in somebody's life that they become anxiety free and depression free for the rest of their life. And it's usually like post 50. But what's rare about it is like you got to go through what I call like a Mike Tyson level amount of pressure. You got to be in a rock and a hard place, because it's really like the pressure is creating this diamond Deadpool type effect where it's like your genes are just not going to turn on, like watching our son Cody or watching myself, like trying to get hiring or editing. It's like, why is this dragging on so long? It's like, oh, because I have a way to wiggle out. Oh, I don't hiring an editor is hard. You know what? I'll just stay up a little later. I'll just edit it myself. So there's a way out. And so eventually I've got to get trapped, and the pressure in that area has got to force, there's nowhere else to go, or I die at that spot. And that'll then force the growth and the change. Now, the most dangerous thing I see is people's lives that are too easy, and therefore the decades are rolling on and you're not getting that pressure. So like Owen Cook talks about, you got to put the evolutionary pressure on yourself. Change up jobs, join the Coast Guard, shake it up, write that book you don't want to do, something that you're responsible to put the evolutionary pressure on yourself,
Yeah.
Personally like to live life intensely and goal driven. Probably was attracted to ops initially with the message of a hero's journey. So just 2 seconds on that. I see the greatest mechanism is in growth in life is the hero's journey, but so much of that is outside of your control. Like you have to be living in Ukraine and then Russia fucking invades and like, boom, here you go. You're off and running on like the perfect hero's journey, right? Like think about that, like what those people are going through over there and will for generations. So it's a little scary, because then that means that your self-growth is outside of your control. But it's like something that is about 20% as good, which sure as hell beats zero, is the self-drive, the discipline, taking on little goals. It's not as effective. It's like you see somebody who's like born a farmer. Like you ever see these STPs that are like raised on the farm and they're just naturally muscular. Like they're going to beat the hell out of a bodybuilder who's doing it in a self-driven kind of controlled environment. Nothing's going to beat that farm muscle that's organic and there from the environment. But your second best is to go to the gym and get the built up muscles. So like the self-growth and the daily discipline and the goals, it's not as good as self-journey, but it sure beats nothing. Without it, you just fall back into la la land, Dave's disorder cluster doc ever be available? So we don't, yes. Like the disorders and stuff. That's going to be a ways away. That's going to be something that I'm not going to do by myself. Like, I'm going to have lawyers and counselors and team members and stuff. I'm already doing too much just on a small team here, as well as that isn't something that my little brain can track all that data. There's too many types. There's too many things going on. There's too much research needs to be looked at. So right now I'm just trying to share what I'll see from time to time. But long term, when we get the profiles and get some real data, get a team, get stuff building up, that's the kind of stuff we're going to be looking for. Is high priority is disorders, sexual, gender, health issues is another one, kind of overlapping with 23andMe and stuff like that. But yeah, that's the long-term goal. It's got to get to hiring and me doing my demons first. Yes, you, David Goggins, put yourself through as much suffering as possible at all times. You can have pleasure without suffering. Manually going through suffering will force pleasure into existence. Yeah. It's like, but yeah, it's better than nothing. Yeah. That's what I love. If you're a 1 or a 2, like you got to get yourself in on entrepreneurship. Like if you're a 1 or 2, you got to do it. You got to write that book. You got to do something crazy. You got to throw yourself into something to where you're overwhelmed with too many things to be responsible for, and dive in and have that evolutionary challenge. And what I'm seeing with the specialist is like, you got to level up at whatever it is you're doing. Like if you're a yellow belt, you got to get to brown belt. If you're at work, you got to get better at focusing on that specialization. There's so many areas where you can find a way to turn up the pressure, make a game out of it, no matter what you're doing. That's the job stuff is such a good one, because it's like jobs are careers are there's 8 hours a day to put pressure on you. Yeah. Like don't waste it is what I'm saying. Don't waste your job. Like you can really put a lot of self-torture on yourself either way.
Mm-hmm. Anything else you wanting to respond to?
Looking good, man. Looking good. Yeah. Yeah, good stuff, dude. Lots of deep, crazy, good stuff to be continued.
Yeah.
Look, I'm just getting started. All right, man.
Here, let me mind if I end the broadcast? And
that sounds great. Thanks so much for setting this up.
Yeah. See you, everyone.
Bye, everybody.